Welcome back to the program presented by Novig, part 2 of my conversation with Tom Crean. Let's get back to Tom. This episode of the program is presented by Novig, the peer-to-peer sports prediction market with no house, no hidden fees, and the best odds in the game. Whether you're a casual fan or a sharp trader, Novig lets you play smarter, win bigger, and make sports picks in a whole new way. And it's available in over 35 states. Learn more at novig.us/Woj and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. Welcome back to Coach Tom Crean for part 2 of our conversation that started last week on the program with one of the people in basketball that I know who has put and puts a tremendous amount of time, energy, and thought into team building, not just in college basketball, but the NBA, college football, the NFL, your tentacles from your relationships, Tom, with Jim and John Harbaugh, your father-in-law, Jack Harbaugh, Mike McCarthy, across the spectrum. And obviously, you're also working, doing some work for the Timberwolves and Bucks on their studio shows. And so you give a lot of thought to what team building looks like across the spectrum. I want to start again here, though, Tom. The gulf now between mid-major and high-major basketball, certainly we're living it at Bonaventure. And, I think there was a time where, Bonaventure had this a few years ago with a group that won the Atlantic 10, went to the NCAA tournament, came back the next year, had an injury or two, ended up in the NIT, but one at Colorado, at Oklahoma, at Virginia to go to the NIT Final Four, was ranked as high as 16th in the country in a season. That's because you're able to keep a group of players together for 3 years, 4 years in that instance. And now what we're seeing is that group that, would like to take its crack at the high major one and dones in the NCAA tournament, where it's got 23-year-old guys against somebody's really talented 18, 19-year-olds, that's where you might see upsets. Mm-hmm. What's changed, right, Tom, is you can't keep that mid-major group. Once that group even has a little success or those individual players have success, they're typically off to a high major. And, and it's funny, the high majors are gobbling up the tournament bids. They have basically, the scheduling makes it really difficult. The net, all these factors that impact how many bids mid-majors can get, and it's as if like they don't think any of our teams are good enough for their tournament, but they want all our players. And the world's really changed at our level.
Oh, there's no doubt. And because it's going to come back to money and power. I mean, it always has, it always will. And that's why I always thought it was such wasted energy, to get up and in a press conference and pontificate about the state of the game or talk about what we don't have. I mean, it doesn't matter. Those fall on deaf ears. And that's the way that it is. But what doesn't fall on deaf ears, okay, are your players. And I think what has changed, there's always, we've talked about this many times. The scoreboard for me with the next level was how much money our players had earned or were earning in the NBA. And that was always a big deal to me. Like right now, even not coaching with the guys we have, I mean, we're getting close to $1.5 billion, with the money they've earned or are contracted to earn. And I always took great pride in that because so many of those guys were not ranked highly, right? So it was always about the development of those people, whether it was Dwayne Wade, whether it was OG Anunoby, whether it was Victor Oladipo, Nick Claxton, guys like that weren't ranked high. Anthony Edwards, yes, he was ranked high. Cody Zeller ranked extremely high. But even going back to the Steve Novaks and the Travis Deaners, those guys weren't ranked high. right? So the bottom line is, how do you develop them? And I think the moment that you put anything ahead of how much value are you going to create for your players with their skills, with their ability to be teammates, you're getting away from it. And now there's another scoreboard. And it's just the way that it is. The scoreboard is, okay, how much money did I help this player generate, okay, by moving up? And again, we've talked about this last week. There's still times where they're making the wrong choices for why they leave, okay? And most of the time when somebody would leave us, we're probably thinking, probably close to probably 80, 90% of the time they're making the wrong decision. But the bottom line is that's the choice that's been made. And you have to be able to rely on how you build the program with the fundamentals, with the skills, with how you're teaching to get through adversity every day by sharing it and overcoming it. You know, all the different things that you do, okay? Because the day and ages of the Tom Izzos and the Mark Few's and the Mark Schmidts and the Mike Krzyzewskis and the Matt Painters, they're not as many of those guys that have been able to build that longevity into their program, that have that culture of their guys that are there, right? But there's still a lot of programs that have great traditions, and there's still new coaches that come in. And really what becomes part of your culture then is what you do on a daily basis to prepare people when it's convenient, when it's inconvenient, when it's easy, when it's not easy, okay? When they feel like doing it, when they don't feel like doing it. And that's what so much of this becomes. So for the coaches that now, obviously you have to be able to replace what you're going to lose and financially in this day and age. Then you have to have that group of evaluators like we talked about last week that can really, really assess what works for the head coach, what fits this style of play. But you cannot get away. And if there's one thing that I've seen, even with how NBA scouting views this and how college coaches view this, is they see this is where transaction comes in. Well, I'm only going to have them for a year. I'm only going to have them for 9 months. I'm only going to have them for 10 months. Man, I get away from those conversations as fast as I can because I know there's probably nothing we're going to agree on. Okay, when we look at player evaluation and player improvement and the fact that, well, we just have them for a short period of time, so we got to get the most out of them for our program. Why did you get into coaching? Okay, that is not what you got into this for. You did not get into this to just have somebody for a short period of time, move on, see you later. You got in to make them better so that you could both win. And I think that gets lost so much. And we could talk forever on the mid-major level, but no matter how long you have a player, you've got to give them an experience. And my brother-in-law says this, Jim says this. And I really believe it because I've seen him do it. Whether it's the LA Chargers or whether it's the Michigan Wolverines or it's the San Diego Toreros or Stanford Cardinal, he wanted whatever player left there to feel that they had the best experience and the best coaching job and played for the best coach they could have possibly played for, no matter how long they played for. And that is a heck of an attitude, Adrian. When you can view it that way every day, you can deal with the losses of people. You can deal with somebody leaving you, somebody graduating. You can deal with that because you're trying to give that person the best they can possibly get every day by any means. And I think that's an attitude that I know I try to have and would have in a second if I went back to it. And I think it's an attitude that everybody's got to work to achieve every day.
You're absolutely right. And I think also, I've tried to do this, whether it's in recruiting or in retention. It's easy to fall on the crutch of, well, someone just offered more money.
Sure.
And that's why we didn't get them. That's why either we didn't get them in recruiting or the player left. And I think I've tried as much as I can to go back in both situations in just the year I've been here and really go ask hard questions about whether it was in recruiting, could we have personalized the recruitment better? What could we have done better? Certainly money might have been a part of it, but I think you're kidding yourself if you think that's just because somebody else offered more. We've had plenty of guys take less to be a part of us. Frank Mitchell, who's been just incredible for us at Bonaventure this year. We were not his highest offer and probably not even close. Sure. And he valued some things here. And I think he's benefited from it. But other guys, I think you have to be honest with yourself, not just when you don't get a guy in recruiting or a player moves on into the portal and maybe certainly go somewhere for more. But did you do everything you could to do what you just described, Tom, to give him the experience, that the best experience, and coach him the best you can, and the environment and all the intangibles, academically, support, all the things that go in every day to a player's time at a school? And I think it just can't be, well, they're paying them more. Because
Sure.
I think you're lying to yourself in a lot of cases. And I think it's on us to make sure, because that's going to help you with the next group. Or, like, again, it's, I think it's incumbent on all of us to sort of like look in the mirror and say, could I have done more with this player?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you where it really affects is administrations. They don't want to hear that. Okay. Because what's always gone on in the past is what's now is they're paying them more legally. We used to always say they're paying him more illegally. Well, like they bought this guy or they paid this. I had an athletic director at Indiana. I would tell him recruiting stories and he would nod, but I know it was going in one ear and right out the other. Part of that is because he hadn't experienced that world, but part of it is he didn't care. Right. And I think what we learn is the old Lou Holtz quote, don't complain about your problems. Okay. Because 80% of the people are happy you have them and 20% don't care. Right. Or however he said it. Right. Maybe it was flipped, but that's kind of where we're at right now in this. And I think in recruiting, and I used to say this to our staff all the time, there is never a bad time to make a player better. And you don't even have to see them to do it. Right. So it's not always about the face to face. Sometimes it's about okay, what did you see? I love to doing this in recruiting. And if you can't help the player get better during recruiting, okay, irregardless if you get them or not, all right, how are they to know you're going to help them get better when you get them? And I would constantly, watch tape, be watching games, and clip clips, right? Clips of a possession or two possessions and send it. And then I didn't verbalize over it. Sometimes I guess I learned to I would talk over it on a voice memo. But then what I would do is I just put something out. Use your left hand better. Drop your right shoulder. You could have gone by this person lower here, but even lower on the second person. Like that to me gave me energy. Because if I'm going to care enough about you to recruit you, I should care enough about you to help you get better while I'm recruiting you. And I think there's so many different ways to help people. The common thing, especially in sports now, is, you got to touch somebody. We got to give them a touch. We got to touch them. We're in the game. Well, I got to get my touches, right? Part of a touch, like, what is that, right? What is it? If we're just counting our touches, did the touch matter? Did the video clip matter? Did the message I sent them matter? Did the letter I wrote them matter? Did the quote I sent them matter? Because I always looked at it like this in anything that we put up inside of our buildings. There's three people that should be affected by your messaging, right? It's your recruiting, it's your current day players, and it's really if the average fan walked in with their family, you would hope that they would be impacted by that messaging as well. And because messaging should give you energy, it should give you thought, it should give you something that inspires you. Because that's the only way you're going to win, when you have them. And so finding little ways to get points across end up being big ways. Because again, a lot of people are not willing to put the time and the work in, and they would rather just talk about how much money it's going to take for this person or how much that person has. Adrian, you know it. I read it all the time. In football, it's even crazy. There's probably not one Division I football coach that can't name what every other school is spending on the books and off the books in football. And I'm sure it's the same in basketball. Well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. That's your job. It's your job to know what everybody else has. But your job to do the best you have with what you have. Yeah. And part of that is to make sure that your evaluation and your investment in their improvement and that you're creating value for them after they leave you in every possible way, whether they understand it or not, is so important. And I don't think there's any other way around that. And I don't think that's ever going to change, because you and I both know the business of sports, the business of college basketball has changed, but how you win has not changed. It has not changed at all, right? There's different ways to win. That's always been there, will always be there. But the fundamentals, all right, the character, the toughness, And when you're not, I told a friend of mine in this coaching the other day that his team is not necessarily as tough as he would like it to be. Okay. Well, when you're not physical and when you're not tough yet, you better be alert and aware, because being alert and having awareness still gives you something. If you're not tough and you're not physical and you're not aggressive, and at the same time you're getting beat on back cuts, or you don't step into somebody or block them out, or you're not playing ball, you man, or you're not good on the weak side, man, you're really in trouble. So you better control what you can control constantly. And I just think that gets lost in coaching. It gets lost all the way around. And you can't take the easy path when you're trying to convince somebody to come with you, or when you're making them better. And I get that these are shotgun marriages right now in the portal. I totally get that. I mean, I did it for 2 years on Zoom, and where you never see people face to face till they literally get on your campus. So we've seen all that. But the bottom line is, you better be thinking about how you're going to put value in that person every day before you get them, so that it becomes a way of life when you do have them.
Just like a coach looks for every edge on game day, Novig gives fans the edge when they make their sports predictions. With no house and no hidden fees, Novig delivers the best odds every time. It's the smarter way to back your instincts. Learn more about Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market, at novig.us/Woj, and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. I've got a sign right in my eye line here, a sight line, Tom. It's a little Lombardi placard, and it says, it's a Lombardi quote: "The measure of who we are is what we do with what we have." And I think about it every day, and I think, listen, it's not just true at, say, Bonaventure, it's true, wherever you are. But, I think the one thing, and you said it, like, complaining about the money and complaining about what other people have, people will sometimes say, do you think they'll figure this out and it'll level off? And I'll be like, they are not going to legislate the ability for, say, Bonaventure and Duquesne and whomever else to be able to financially compete with, VCU and St. John's. Like, that's not going to happen. So you have to figure out what your pathway is, how you're going to do it. You don't have to have the most money to have success. Listen, we see it out there that the highest payrolls, that does not guarantee success. Now, if you have the lowest, it probably fairly guarantees you will not have much. But if you're not exactly, way at the bottom, you're somewhere in that, even the bottom third, you can look like, I try to look through different leagues and see, where the efficiencies are. And it leads me to this. I think some of the payrolls that have gotten really high at the high major level, I don't know necessarily that it's because they went out and gathered the most talent. I think in some cases they might have been a little less disciplined at how they negotiated, where sometimes they get into a negotiation with a rival and the competitive nature of the coaches. I don't want to lose to that guy. And all of a sudden you get this bidding war going on that's way over a guy's market number. But I don't want to give in and say no and let him have this guy. I think being able to walk away from negotiations, that's something I've been trying to learn and felt good about in a few cases last year, where you have to be willing to walk away. And all of a sudden you end up with a payroll that's probably not necessarily reflective of the talent or the kind of team that people think you have, because the numbers leaked out. And I think there's a way to be efficient and, like you said, evaluate. And the most important thing is, and certainly as a GM in this, figure out who can not just play for your coach, but who fits your environment and your, for us, a small school with 2,000 students playing in one of the best leagues in the country. It's not for everybody. You have to find the guys that do. And I think, there's a pathway out there for a lot of us, but the margin for error is a lot smaller. We make one big mistake on our roster financially, it can be paralyzing where, another school can make a mistake on a player who they're paying a significant part of their payroll, but can survive it, get around it, and have enough other resources to cover up for it.
Absolutely. And I think administratively, it's so important that even if your direct report, the person that you're reporting to, doesn't understand this landscape, there's got to be somebody around that understands the landscape that can help get that across to them other than the coach or the general manager, because it is a really, really hard process. And the bottom line is there's so many constituents that have to be answered to. But at the end of the day, it's like injuries, right? There's very few people that ever really want to. They know the injuries and they feel bad, but it doesn't change their view, right? You should win. And a lot of times that's the way it goes in administrations and things like that. So at the end of the day, as you said, it's not going anywhere. As long as there's more money to be made, as long as there's more eyeballs to see the games and the products, which is going to continue to exponentially grow at high levels, right? It's not going to change. It's not going to change. And you can dislike it all that you want, but all you're doing is wasting energy. And there's a place for negative energy inside of a team. Sometimes you got to pierce a player. You got to pierce your team to get them to understand what they've got to do to get better. There's got to be a level of toughness. But negative energy is not wasting time on thoughts that really aren't going to change. So do the best. And it really comes back again to this too, Adrian. There's three things that over time, when it comes to games, so when it comes to mid-majors, when it comes to all these different games, okay? And number one is the game is always giving you something. And you got to figure that out, right? Like always inside of that game, there's a way to win that game. Because there was a great, great quote by the great General Hal Moore, who there was a movie done about, we were soldiers, and Mel Gibson played him in the movie. And it had a lot of great lines, but one he said was, there is always one more thing that we can do to influence the outcome in our favor. And then another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. And his whole thing was, you don't stop looking, right? You don't stop looking for what that is in a game. Right? Then there's the other one. It's the Jeff Van Gundy quote. Don't ever underestimate how screwed up or where the other team could be on the night that you played them. Right? And then there's the other part of that. All right. The third one is, okay, all you have to do is be better than that team that night. Right? And they kind of all go hand in hand, but there's always a way to win a game. And you're right. When you don't have enough talent and you're fighting, and I learned so much about this my first 3 years at Indiana because we were on probation. And I mean, there was no NIL, there was no transfer portal, there was no grad transfers, none of that. Like we had to fight our way out of underground, to get the thing back up. But you learn how much you love coaching and how much you love the thrill of trying to figure out a way to win the game. And if there was ever a time that really in my life made me realize how much I absolutely loved coaching, because I loved it as an assistant, I loved it for 9 years at Marquette, but it got really, really hard for 3 years in Indiana. All right. Really hard. And the bottom line is I love this. I love trying to find a way to get guys better, to overcome this, to go against these great programs. How do we find a way to be in this game in the last 4 minutes? And to me, that's ultimately what you're doing every day as a coach, no matter what you're dealing with. And the more that assistants come up the ladder of, like I would tell guys when they were looking to leave, I'd say, okay, if you want to go learn the business and be part of the business and coaching, go learn all about it. Yeah, you can go to that school. But if you want to really learn how to coach when it's hard and coach on how to overcome problems and coach when they don't want to hear it and coach when you're down 10 with 4 minutes to go, let's stay here and see if we can figure it out, because that's what you're going to need to have any longevity. And that was before the business even changed to the way it is now. So the moment that you put the business ahead of your passion to be the best possible coach for your players that you can possibly be, okay, you're at a loss. Your ceiling is starting to get hit. It's the same thing I say about your team when you're developing your team. And this is important for St. Bonaventure. It's important for everybody, okay? You got to get your entire team better, okay, because they keep raising your floor, right? When everybody, the bottom of the roster, the middle of the roster, when they get better, they keep raising your floor. But if your best players don't get better, Adrian, they set your ceiling. Okay. And all of a sudden, if the best players aren't getting better, no matter how much better everybody else is getting, your ceiling is going to get set. because they leveled off. And you can't have that. And that's why whether it's the top 3 players, the last 3 players, whatever it is, development from the staff, you can always do something to make a player better, whether you're seeing them or not. And that's the bottom line of what this thing is all about. And it's certainly getting lost. And I get it, right? People say, well, you're not in it every day. You're not in the locker rooms. I'm around enough players to know that they don't know that they don't know. But I'm telling you, those young players, they want to know. They want to learn. Their parents didn't know before somebody got into their head and told them, you got to make this and you've got to have that. And this is your brand and this is what we can pay you. They wanted their child to be successful and to get skilled and to learn things before they started to see the money. And what you've got to be able to do with them is you got to get them back to the roots, okay, of what make them successful, their passion, their desire, building into their strengths, being obsessed with their weaknesses. And when you have that, now you've got a chance to have a long-standing, long-lasting relationship, irregardless of how long you coach them. And that's what has got to be at the crux of every program. That's a culture that everybody should be trying to achieve. And it's hard. I totally get that it's hard, but it's doable because again, the business has changed. How you win and how you get the most out of people has not changed.
Absolutely. Tom, I would absolutely sign up for a part 3 with you. This was a lot of fun. 2 weeks around the holidays, talking basketball, talking team building with you. We'll do this again soon. Have a great new year, and I know we'll be talking a lot of basketball in 2026.
Well, we just talked on our podcast the way we talk in person and the way we talk on the phone. So everybody got to get in on the conversation. But you're the best. What you do, you're one of the best friends person could have. I love you. I think if I didn't know the first thing about you, I'd have an unbelievable amount of respect for how you've done things in your life, how you do things in your life, the kind of family man that you are, the way you treat people. But the good news is I do know you. So it makes it go up that much higher. But you're doing a fantastic job, and I'm glad you're providing things for so many people to see. And I know that the St. Bonaventure program got better the day you walked in and every day since that you went back in there to chase your passion of making St. Bonaventure University as good as it can possibly be.
Well, it means a lot, Tom. Right back at you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this 2-part episode with Tom Crean. Have a great new year. We'll see you all next Wednesday.